Hello everyone, Yannis here from our Mac channel. How it feels to be frequency sensitive or be targeted with frequencies? How does this affect the quality of our life? And most importantly, what practical steps can we take in order to reduce or eliminate completely the issue? Stay tuned and we're gonna find out. We're gonna hear a very interesting and encouraging testimony from Nicola, where she's sharing with us her experience being attacked with frequencies and what helped her to overcome the issue, how it affected her life the last 2.5 years, and what practical steps she took in order to overcome the issue. It's very encouraging as well because she's prompting us to share similar experience if we have faced this issue, to share it so more people they will be aware, because there are solutions, we are not helpless. The first step is of course to understand what is the problem, what is the attack, then to acknowledge, yes, it is happening, then change our attitude, mental attitude towards the issue, and of course then find the practical solutions in order to counteract and protect ourselves from this. So share the video because it's important people to know, and if you have faced similar experience, as well speak out and share your experience. Enjoy the testimony, be inspired, and see you in the next video. Thank you.
My name is Nicola. I'm a normal and not very normal person both at the same time. I'm frequency sensitive. So I experience life in a different way to most people, in an extremely intensive way. This audio is for people who are highly frequency sensitive, as well as what's known as targeted individuals. It's hard for me to know sometimes whether I'm being targeted or whether I'm generally being frequency sensitive. I'm not sure it matters especially, because in a way, with everything that's coming down the pike with intensive new frequencies and 5G and then 6G and so on, everyone will be targeted. We'll all be experiencing sensitivity to these frequencies. The reason I'm sharing my story now, and that I didn't share it 6 months ago or a couple of years ago, which is when it first started, is that only now am I at a point of really understanding what's happened, of being able to integrate that, and of being able to largely transcend it, at the very least to see through it, to understand it, to not be taken down by it. But also I'm at a point in time where I feel it has been largely transcended. Now that doesn't mean, as it currently stands, that I'm not getting any frequency attacks or feeling things. It's just that when it does happen, there is such an insight around it. I'm able to stop it in its tracks. My own journey with frequencies has turned into something positive, an insight and understanding as to how this planet works behind the scenes. A great clarity that I don't believe I would ever been able to access if I hadn't had to experience, work through and understand everything that's happened to me personally. I guess it's true to say that oftentimes in life, when we are greatly challenged, that it's at those points in time that we can reach out far deeper, look far further, open channels of insight, open doorways into new spaces that wouldn't previously have been available if we were just following the path of a quote-unquote normal and fairly uncomplicated life. In my own journey, I've also developed a number of tools, things that can help to lessen the intensity of the attacks, things that have helped me anyway. So, in this next stage, I'm going to focus on tangible examples of being targeted, although I'd like to highlight again that there are some instances where I genuinely do not know how direct that targeting is. For example, what if with the frequency fence around the planet, an individual, a consciousness, was on those outer parameters? So by that I mean when we are in a state of contemplation or meditation or living where we're always pushing the boundaries, wanting to transcend further, wanting to play outside of what we know as the matrix or the holograph or whatever you consider life to be. I do feel that it may be that there's an artificial intelligence that's very present, a bit like a border guard in that space, and that any frequency coming from any of us that is seeking to push beyond that will be picked up and will be pushed back with great force. I feel that's an important point, because it may be that for some of this targeting anyway, that it's not like so-and-so with this name who lives in that house on so-and-so street. It may not be as specific as that. It might simply be an artificial intelligence picking up a frequency that is us and analysing it and firing back to us. Indeed, perhaps even taking our frequency and mirroring back to us, creating a distortion. In the end, one could argue, why does it matter? If you're getting hit, you're getting hit. Let's talk about some more down-to-earth examples. I know that types of things I'm going to talk about now are widely discussed, but this is my testimony, so I'm going to include my version of events here. The first one is being targeted via sat-nav, via satellite. My husband and I had been on a road trip. We were just returning and had to navigate a lot of back roads, so naturally it made sense to put on the sat-nav. Shortly after we put it on, I started to feel a bit odd. There was a wooziness in my head. It wasn't nausea, but it was a big feeling of disorientation. As the minutes progressed, the mood between my husband and I in the car shifted and became very tense, really aggravating, till it reached an almost explosive level. It was like this frequency was pushing. So I said to my husband, look, let's stop the car. I said, I really need to get out of the car right now. So he pulled over. I got out of the car. I started walking. I was maybe 6 to 8 feet away from the car. I looked around to the car and my knees gave way. As I was falling to the ground, what I saw above the car looked like a very large compass. Just by seeing that and looking at it, seeing the truth of it, it vanished. I was able to pick myself up, shake myself down, and we returned home. Another example at that same period of time was when there was a very low-flying fighter jet which came over our house so low that not only was the noise of it beyond belief, but the force of it actually made me fall to the ground again. But it wasn't just me, it was my beloved dog friend too, and she was blind, and she got so scared by the noise that she started running down the hill by our house, scared. And when I also tried to grab her to protect her, I scraped my right knee really badly. When I went back to the house to deal with that, I saw that the frequency that was created in the interaction of the jet had manifested as what I'm going to call an overlay in my knee. Now, what do I mean by that? A bit like a kite mark, a bit like a stamp of origination, certainly something that was inserted to stay in place, something that would stay far longer than once the knee had physically healed. And this was perhaps the first time that I'd seen with such clarity that when we're being intentionally targeted or frequency attacked or just zapped in general, that there is more to it than meets the eye, more to it than what we feel, more to it than what we hear. But it wasn't just me, it was my best friend in the world. And in the same way that my right knee had been hit, something happened to her right knee as well. Within about 48 hours, her body swelled up, and her right knee in particular, and she died shortly after. My belief is that she was taken out. Of course, it could be coincidental, my right knee and her right knee. Then there was Elsie, my other best friend. We were never sure if Elsie was Siddy's daughter or if they were sisters. They were rescue dogs. And I believe that in a similar way to us rescuing them and taking them out of the dog pound, that they were very protective to me and acted as shields, and that this took a toll. The summer that Elsie got sick, there were non-stop planes. I'll talk about plane noises in a minute. She would hide away under a bush to protect herself, but it didn't work. She became sick with a tumour, with cancer. Then we were working with her on healing and she was on her way back. And then the frequencies got the upper hand again, the planes. On the night she died, we were being frequency zapped at an insane level. A friend of mine who is a psychic and healer worked non-stop with me for hours. We battled to save Elsie from the frequencies, but we weren't able to. Before our Skype connection got suddenly cut off, my friend told me that she could see a frequency being targeted directly on top of our house. There's a certain point, there's a weathercock. It looks copper, I don't know if it's copper, I'm not sure, but it was coming in at that point into the house. So, as my connection with my friend had been cut out, I continued to battle to help to protect Elsa. Very shortly after that, there was an enormous crashing noise. This was the middle of the night. It was around 4 o'clock. My husband woke up with the noise. We heard it was coming from upstairs. We went up to the room, which is the room that is directly under the part of the roof that has the weathercock. and one of the electric blinds was just going up and down and up and down, and it was from the frequency attack that was taking place. I seem to recall we had to turn the power off or something to stop it. So I went back down to the room to where Elsa was lying to be with her, but it was all too much, and she died within the next 5 minutes or so. Continuing along the military-industrial theme, here's another example that was clearly targeted. I don't know when the low-flying aeroplane noise started, but I think it went on for up to 18 months. It started in a very odd way. I was walking down the lane talking to someone when I first heard this low humming plane engine noise. I registered it, but didn't really think too much more about it. But I did think it was odd that on the walk that it didn't stop, because normally planes pass. I thought, wow, it must be circling or something, or are there lots of them and they're just passing through? But it didn't stop, and it was still there when I returned to the house from the walk. And then, pretty much every single time I left the house, there was this noise, the planes. Every walk I went on, every time I went into the garden, I recorded it. I've got a lot of recordings of it, but other people heard it too. At least in what I call my reality. I say that because it turns out that these planes weren't real, and this was a mind control attack, a programming. I started to think something was up when once a week I started going into the local town for something. I thought, why is it that when I'm in town the noise isn't there, but it's just when I'm at home? And then when I went on business trips, my husband would say, oh, there were no planes while you were gone. I'm like, well, that's odd. And why was it when I'd get off the bus coming back from being in town, at any time of the day that I returned, the plane noise would start immediately? Then there was a friend of mine who I used to speak to on a very regular basis, and I started noticing that when I connected with her, the plane noise would start. I always knew that they would stop at some point. I felt that. I intuitively knew that there was a month where it would come to an end, and in my mind I imagined that it was some sort of a military operation and it was going to finish by a certain point, but nothing prepared me for what would happen and how it did finish. It was through the testimony of someone on YouTube talking about this sort of thing, the truth of understanding what was really going on simultaneously ended the plane noise. It was genuinely one of the most gobsmacking experiences I've had in my entire life, beyond belief. So this is what I heard from the testimony of this person, was that there is a certain frequency that we can be tuned into in the brain where we hear a plane noise, but the plane does not actually exist. So even though I was able to record it, even though people in my life were hearing it, it didn't really exist. And this is how I know how I experienced it, because I said to myself, okay, the next time I hear a plane, if I hear one again, now that I've got this understanding, I will know that this is not true, that it is not real, that it's a program. And the opportunity for this truth to be confirmed came pretty fast. I was in my office. I could hear the noise outside of the plane from inside. And by the way, they always went on for a really long time. That was the thing. It wasn't just like plane passing. It would just go on and on and on. Sometimes it just seemed throughout the day. Never stopped. Weekends, public holidays, Sundays, nothing stopped it. Always there. Anyway, so I was in my office, hear the sound, open the skylight, and I heard it and I was listening to it. As I listened to it, I remembered what I'd heard that person saying about this being a military control program, weaponry, whatever. And I felt into the truth of that. I allowed myself to experience reality through a 100% comprehension and sight of the truth. In that moment, the noise of the plane stopped. Like that, instantaneous. It was gone. It was gone. Naturally, I was a little bit like, oh my God, I don't ever want it to come back again. Has it really gone? Is it going to come back? Well, more like, has it really gone forever? I knew it had gone in that moment. In the weeks that followed, there were a couple of times when I was out on a walk where I heard it. Immediately, I reminded myself that it was not true. Put on some music, cleared any fear, and it went. And I really only had to do that a few times, and now it's been months, and I never heard it again. So that was definitely targeted. What was really annoying for me about the plane thing was that I have a job, I have work to do, and lots of times when it wasn't just the noise, but it was the frequency that would come in with this that was really quite torturous, and that would take my focus away. I wouldn't be balanced, I would be out of synchronicity. And that's difficult when you then have to do a client call and you have to be all really switched on and really focused, and you're struggling. Very hard. As I continue this testimony, I'd like to go back to the fighter jets and what I saw in my knee. I see things, by the way. I'm psychic. I'm a seer. I'm very sensitive. That's why. And that's that when I'm feeling a frequency. Now here we go into this territory of I don't know if this is targeted individual stuff or it's just response to frequency, in which case we're all targeted, we're all being zapped. But when I feel a frequency, which could be coming in from a satellite, it could be directed energy weaponry, there's a very particular thing that happens that can be seen. And interestingly, and luckily, that my husband could see. Above my head, a visual appears when I'm being attacked. And there is a very stylized depiction every time. Like a logos, like a stamp, like a program maybe. I'll give you an example of the sorts of things that can be viewed above my head when I'm being frequency zapped. A yellow rubber duck, a yacht, a cake, really innocuous sort of household stuff. In the main, sometimes into other parts of my body there might be a dagger or things like that, but the one I'm talking about right now are these really quite harmless seeming objects. And then what I found is that a combination of my husband seeing it and then he'd like pull it out, zap it away and that would really help enormously. And then I would do a few things as well. But it was this seeing of it really Because when we see these things, they evaporate. They have to go. The truth of it, they can't continue expressing or live in that light of the truth. I believe that some, at least, of those frequency attacks are not because one is just generally sensitive to a frequency, but because there's more than that behind it, that there's something particular behind it. That said, one could argue that there's something very particular behind 5G and microwave frequencies in general and other things. So this is this blurry area I keep going back to. But when I asked about the origination of these particular visuals, I got a laboratory in Portsmouth. So I thought, well, maybe it's some industrial military thing coming from there. Now, whilst the plane noise has thankfully stopped, why do I say thankfully? That's not the right thing, because when we're getting targeted, it's really tough on one's confidence and esteem. It stopped because I saw the truth, and in the light of the truth, it couldn't stand. But the attacks where I see things above my head and I feel frequency coming into that level have not stopped yet. Oh yeah, so this mind to skull, mind talking, brain talking thing. Well, there is no doubt that that has to be targeted in some way. I mean, unless it's a computer again and they pick us up at a frequency, I certainly feel that the majority, but not all of it, in the experience I had of that, was AI and was programmed. And I think it was a program into our subconscious and unconscious that finds an area of vulnerability and has been able to understand and map our responses to life situations and to replay the frequency of that response. What's an example of that? So, if someone perhaps lacks confidence as a child, then the voice in the head might say, you're no good anyway, or something. I would really like to stress this is not a shadow self egoic thing. I can tell you that the tone of the voice, the frequency of it, had nothing to do with some sort of genuine, authentic, unconscious or subconscious reaction. It was malevolent, sadistic, intentional. I no longer have any issues with that because the truth, the clarity of understanding what was going on, and my approach to it was that it was just so ridiculous, so laughable, so pathetic, that whoever was behind that was so sad that I just wasn't even going to give it the time of day. So there was no point in them trying that anymore. As an aside, in terms of targeted attacks and what's going on behind the scene, I have actually seen faces. You know, I have seen people behind this. They don't look like ETs or anything. They look like humans. Now, I don't know, are they 100% humans to be able to do this sort of thing? Well, I guess if you look back in history, World War II, there were some pretty horrendous sadistic things that went down. And post that continued in experiments on people in the US, in Canada, mind control experiments, all that sort of stuff. So what I have seen is these young men, and they do this via computer programs. I wonder if that's what I heard. I won't mention her name. She's an amazing lady who totally understands all of this. I don't know if it's what she calls the laptop boys, but it's like they're sitting there on these PCs or on these laptops that's affecting us directly. There's another type of persona I've seen behind this. The nearest I can describe them is Ukrainian. For some reason it wasn't so much Russian as there was a part of Russia. I think it was the Ukraine. Men, there are some Americans too. Men, middle-aged. Their faces are so ugly. They've always been Caucasian as in white. I see their faces so clearly. And I have passed on those visuals like I'm a camera. You know, with the Nuremberg trials and everything? And they went after the people who'd done all of that. I made sure that every single face that I have seen, that it has been noted, and that I've passed that information on to a higher level of truth, that they cannot and will not escape the spotlight of what they did and what they were involved with. One day, all the information, every single piece, every single attack, every frequency, every face I've seen, every voice into my ears, my head, all of that has been noted, has been logged, my testimony, for the truth will prevail. Just rewinding a little bit to the attacks coming in above my head, where I see a certain depiction, an example of that origination. The first time that I ever felt a frequency zap was on Christmas Day. I can't remember the year. It was so bad and I cried, and it was Christmas Day, a day when one would normally be happy. So I want to talk about that feeling because it was the first attack I ever had. It was the worst attack. The worst, I think, because it was the first, and that my beingness, my consciousness and everything was trying to understand what was going on, but also clocking, understanding, acknowledging that this was just beyond the beyond horrendous. So I think part of it was the shock as well. So on the one hand, there is this feeling of complete lack of empowerment, of powerlessness, because you don't want it there, yet it won't go away. The other thing I remember was the strength of it. The other was the physical in the body. It was like every single cell in my body was jiggling, was irritated. Nothing felt right, nothing felt normal. My head was just totally woo-woo. You know, I felt out of balance. I felt really sad. I knew that it had come from somewhere, from something that was not related to me. At the very least now, when those frequencies come in above my head, that it really doesn't last very long at all. It's more like, I feel like, particularly in my lower spine area, I can feel a tingling. And then I just feel a bit irritated, aggravated, and my focus isn't quite there. And that's just a little aside. Really, on your journey, please know that if you are feeling sad and disempowered, lacking hope even, that you absolutely can pull through this. With apologies for hopping around, going back to the voices in the head thing. So we covered the issue of nasty voices. I'd like to now cover the issue of what I can only call brain disarray. And again, I don't know if this one is targeted or if it's my reaction to external frequencies. How to describe this one? It's like in our life we have all these different experiences. We meet people, we do things, we say things, that informs our reality. And that's held in place by memory. What the experience of this frequency is that it tries to unpull the stitching of what constructed that experience in a very random, abstract way. So all of a sudden, something can pop into my head that is really quite absurd, but that I can link back to something somebody might have said to me at one time or done, or that I read about in the media. So it did inform my experience, but it's like my memory is being jiggled around and something is being popped out and brought into the awareness field. Now, the way I deal with that is just to ignore it. I've got a phrase that has served me so well, which is walk on by. So when that happens, I just walk on by, ignore it, and it just fades away very fast. I don't find that an issue. This next little piece is a bit out there, but I just want to share with you all because I haven't read or heard about it elsewhere, in terms of how these frequencies can impact us. All these attacks, without exception, that I experience come in through what I call the parallel universes. And they all come in, the entrance point is on a diagonal, via the parallels. Because when the truth comes out, it'll be important to know you're not alone, and to know that between us as a group of individuals who've had to go through this, we have an enormous amount of know-how, all from our different lenses of perspective, but combined very powerful. Because as I said, the key to this is the truth of it and just understanding it at every level. When we get frequency zapped, it brings in an algorithm and an attenuation, a tune to which they can dance to, such that they can reassemble in the body. So as an example, tingling of feet, tingling of hands. I used to wake up with my feet tingling from the frequencies coming in at the night, but now through the bucket I pretty much don't. Before I started the bucket, my feet were so sore I could barely walk. Now there's a bit of an overlap here with frequencies and trails from aeroplanes and that contamination. There's an overlap. But what I can say is the more of all of that stuff one gets out of the body, the less impactful and hard-hitting any frequency attacks will be. On that note, I have also found very, very helpful wearing of yellow glasses for frequencies coming out of PCs. Let's talk about hands. I don't know if any of you are aware, but there is a group, a community, spiritual New Age community, with a focus on what's called ascension. In summary, people who go on this journey go on it with really good hearts, but there unfortunately is a big mistruth, as I see it, that's become part of this whole package. I have seen on YouTube that there are people out there doing videos where they are filming their hands and they are showing in their hands these little rainbow sparkling particulates, which they are really pleased with, because they are saying that this is that they are turning into this highly refined rainbow body. I'm not here to judge anyone today, and if there's anything I've learned on this journey, it's to have compassion. For me personally, the day I looked in the sunlight and I saw that there were some sparkles on my hands, was like, oh my God. I immediately started putting my hands in the bucket as well, doing those treatments, and those particles vanished. As I move into this next bit, I'm conscious of the fact that there'll be a lot of you who are not necessarily experiencing this piece. To illustrate what I'm going to say here, there will be a photo library, because as various bits and pieces have been pulled out of my body, I've kept most of them, and I've looked at them under a microscope. The beam frequency makes a match with our interior, and we can have programs that are remotely inserted through frequencies, or let's say homegrown, because the frequency grows it. One of the most incredible ones, and it was so large actually that I took a picture of it with my phone, and it was from the hand. So I had my hand in the bucket, and then what I saw literally emerge from my hand, which is so crazy, was, well, what was it? And it had these lights lit up. The lights were really bright, and they lasted for several days. But that's why, if you're being frequency attacked, to really clean the body up, to really watch your diet, everything, there's an entire package around that. To be clear, I never had anything coming out of my skin unless I had pulled it out with the magnets and everything. I wouldn't have known, it would have been invisible. Here's another really, really weird one. It's quite extraordinary actually. This thing came out of my body that looked like a little tiny fly. So small. Under a microscope you could see it really well. I put it aside. I was getting on with the day job and everything, thinking, oh, I must look at that later. Unfortunately, what happened was that the bit of tissue that I put it on got wet. And when I went to have another look at it, rather than the fly be there, there were these little coloured dots, like coloured ink dots. Now they were two colours, I think one was red and one was another colour. But it's exactly what it looks like when something is being 3D printed. So the form of the fly had changed to this origination that was something quite different. I, of course, should and didn't take a photo when I saw it there. But the good news is that there was one bit missing from the fly. There was a wing that has sort of come apart and that I kept separately. So I do intend to go back to that wing to see if now at this point in time the same thing would happen. Ultra 3D type printing to create harmful forms in our bodies, or forms in our bodies that will attenuate the frequencies more, or maybe even suck frequencies out of us or something like that, but that it is very sci-fi. The other thing I've noticed recently is that when there are really bad frequency days and I'm really being attacked, that there will be more stuff coming out in the bucket, so more of these coloured threads and things. When I wake up and the sky is blue and stays blue and beautiful all day, and it's a good energy day and I'm not feeling negative frequencies, there can be nothing that I see that's visible in the bucket. That doesn't mean there's nothing there, but certainly all those coloured threads aren't there. So there is certainly something very important around what's in our body and how it gets impacted from outside. I was on a path of growth, call it a spiritual path, before all this thing started. Really all began with my very close connection to nature and to the nature beings and talking to trees and flowers and animals and everything. That was before all of this started. And it never went away on my journey. Their voice, their support, their truth, and my connection with my deeper inner self, that combination has truly been the saving grace. So deep was my soul searching to get to the bottom of this frequency attacks that I started to access what I can only call beyond the beyond information. My preference, my choice, has been to use this period of intense challenge to dig deep and move forward, to discover ever deeper understandings really about life, our existence, and about something that I feel deeply to, that's larger than any of us. For me, a space of being at home, of being in a place where I am protected and free to be myself, to be authentic, to be in this home light all the time. Oh, I've just remembered a really important, really yucky frequency attack. This is targeted that I forgot to talk about. So what is this really awful thing? It is when a frequency comes into our reproductive area. It's a sexual stimulus. And at a technical level, what happens is a certain frequency comes in, and then in that part of our bodies there will be something that it makes a frequency match with. The good news is that certainly what I was advised to do by one of the experts who's been helping me is to do something very simple. I'm not going to give out medical information, but he gave me a formula to put in a douche, and then I looked under a microscope at what came out, and there were things that quite clearly were being frequency attenuated. One in particular, I'm just drawing it as I speak, it was a little sort of flowy line, and embedded in it were all these little round sparkling things. When I finished the treatment and got that out, then that whole messing with me stopped. And it was gone for a while, and then it came back, and I did the treatment again, and then it went away. I'm almost, I think, at a point where that has completely stopped, or will completely stop soon. As I said, I so want to be able to look back and see that this was a really very important accelerated journey that got me to a space of personal awareness and understanding that I never would have gotten to otherwise. I have been really reluctant to call myself a targeted individual. Even last night I was talking to some friends and I said, well, I suppose that I've probably been targeted. But then in the same breath I said that I feel that a lot of this, for those of us who are frequency sensitive, has a very large AI component where it's not personal. So I suppose being targeted but not personal, and that will be increasingly the case as there are more satellites going up there, more frequency, etc. What we're all going through now is going to become mainstream, surely. It can be really difficult to share this sort of thing. Like I said, I didn't even want to think that I've been targeted. But it is true that it's important for us all to get our own stories out. And hopefully my story will add weight to other stories out there. And that my own particular pieces that are unique to me will add depth and breadth to the bigger picture, to that wider understanding of what's going on currently, to help us to A, understand it, and B, get to the bottom of it, and for this to be stopped. I've never felt angry about it. I don't know if that's a missing piece, part of the healing that is yet to come through. Maybe following doing this audio, that may emerge. I feel sad about it, and the reason I feel sad is it's not just us, it's the animals as well. I actually have testimony of animals being frequency attacked from the animals. So I come out here today not just for myself, not just for humans, but for the nature beings and animals as well. My name is Nicola. I don't want to further label myself, but speaking here today on behalf of Nicola. I speak today on behalf of all of you, of all of us, who have had to go through, who are going through, and continuing to go through this frequency torture. Because whilst one can call it targeted, individual, at the same time, it's collective, it's all of us. And so my story is your story, and your story is my story. And all of our stories are to be shared, those of us that are being impacted, to avoid any sort of a victim stance, to move the dialogue away from that sort of language, to broaden it, that this applies to everybody on the planet, to all beings on the planet. It's only by looking at it in that way that the truth will come through in a way that is most likely to stop the perpetuation of stories like mine, of stories like yours.
Here are my top tips for nano. The first is the baths, because they're so quick and easy, and they're also brilliant to do if there's been heavy trailing in the skies. So that's bicarbonate of soda, Epsom salts and borax. Number 2 on my list is the bucket. My body was so broken down when I started it, so I was doing it a lot. I was doing it 3 to 4 times a day, but that has eased off as I've got better and better, and now I'm just doing it once a day. A little thing also I do with my bucket is I might add a few extra magnets, take a magnet off, and just keep chopping and changing it so that the frequency is not the same the whole time. I'm just saying that as a little tactic for targeted individuals, who knows, but it feels better for me doing it that way. The next thing I would say is do invest in a microscope. The thing is, once you can see what's coming out, it really makes it real, and that integration, that understanding of what you're seeing is just so important. Next, a very quick and easy thing for the biofilm, I have some organic thyme oil, and this is something that Tony recommends, putting the thyme oil with a carrier. Very essential to have a carrier, or it will burn inside the body, so you can use olive oil or you can use very nice brandy. And frankly, with all the stuff that's going down, I don't mind mixing mine with a little bit of brandy. Okay, I don't know what it is about cream and dairy products, but I am a complete convert, and where I am it's unpasteurized, so I am unbelievably lucky. In particular, I find that when I'm getting frequencies out, so when there are planes and stuff, it can really help just to have a spoonful or 2 of cream. I think it sort of gives the cells extra bounce and extra resilient, but I find it really helps if I'm being attacked to have some cream. Also, cream is great for mixing with certain types of supplement powders. There's something I make up that honestly is so delicious it could be something you just want to have because it tastes so good. I'm not going to go through everything I'm taking, but I'm mixing with my cream, for example, vitamin C, the palmyrate, vitamin B8. I'm also taking Q10 with that. I'm also taking biotin with that, and quercetin. Absolutely love it. Yeah, I get all mine from pure bulk, so no additives. And I always make sure on a regular basis that I'm taking zinc, magnesium, and then I'm taking NAC and L-lysine in capsules. So my next tip is about keeping the air clean around you when I sleep. I've got an ionizer. I've also got an aromatherapy. We do get a lot of trailing here, so we're keeping our lungs good. And then there's something else which I am going to purchase now, which is around ozone, recommended to me. In terms of devices and things, I'm working on it. I would say that a real tip is you've got to learn about science, you've got to learn about physics, you've got to learn about biology, and you've got to learn about mechanics, even if you're not that way inclined, which I am not. Well, I have managed to make grounding devices, and I do sleep with that. So let's move on to the next point. How do we sleep at night when we're being attacked, or just satellites or whatever else? So I'm on a bed now that has no springs, unfortunately, because my other bed was just so amazing. But I'm now on a mattress with no springs whatsoever. It does work better. And then I made up the little magnet packs, you know, the ones where you go one in one direction and one in the other, so that they're forced together, and then you put tape around them in order to be able to sleep with a grounding device also. Here's another bit of advice. Around 2, but also particularly around 4 through till 8, there's a whole load of stuff going down in the astral. If you're waking up feeling absolutely hammered, the solution around that I found is to wake up early. And it's so bizarre because if I wake up at 4 o'clock, you think one would be tired, but actually I have more energy and I'm in a far better state waking up early rather than sleeping in. So waking up early really does help me. The next thing I would say is definitely have some people you can talk to, because you may find that, through no fault of their own really, that your husband or partner just can't handle this, and you know that's okay. At the same time, it's helpful to have people who do know that this is true and that it's not in your head, so that we can share, exchange moral support, and you know, in particular, research and understand. And yeah, it's about discussing, collaborating, sharing, so that together we can really come up with the very best solutions and approaches. So my next point would be around that. Probably one of the most, well, let's say, morale boosting positive things for me has been that I haven't been relying only on all the information and material that's out there on this. Yes, I've researched very deeply, but I've also looked at my own way, and I think that's really important to use all of this to fine-tune our intuition, to get to know our own bodies better. And really, when you've got this sort of ridiculousness going down, no stone unturned, right, when it comes to questions, when it comes to listening, asking our body, asking the universe, higher source, God, whatever. I feel that's extremely important because it's something that is very individual to us and that we own, and that you can do it any time of day or night, and it doesn't cost anything. And guess what? You may just find some really useful information coming through, because we're all very diverse, we're all different, we all have different perspectives, different backgrounds, etc. And there's true value in that if we come together and share our perceptions, what we're seeing, what we're feeling, because what we're dealing with here isn't the norm anyway. So to apply any normal filters is a limitation in itself. On the food side, I am pretty strict with myself, which hasn't been so hard because I had really bad candida problems for a part of my life, what I call my cardboard diet, which didn't even have dairy. So at least having dairy this time around is better. But I cut out alcohol, apart from my tinsy-wincy bit of brandy with my thyme oil. I cut out wheat, I cut out rice. I'm eating a lot of root vegetables. I'm really big on sweet potatoes because they're good for the spleen, so I'm like having half a sweet potato every day for lunch with lots of butter, and that's absolutely delicious. But no honey, no sugar, Vanilla is a really good alternative, so I'm big into vanilla. Diet change certainly works. Well, I get little dispensation that I can have nothing for a while, and then if I want to treat myself to something special and have a really delicious slice of cake or something, I'm okay. Just for that one, I get a bit of dispensation. Oh, another little thing I do actually for brain health and for detox, just talk about detox for a moment, is I have a little jar with choline powder, again, no additives or anything, on my desk. And I just intuitively feel, it's not all day every day by any stretch, but whenever I fancy it, I just dip my finger into the top of it. It's sort of a bit like a sherbet sort of thing. It's really not bad at all. And it's very good for the brain, and I find that helpful. And actually, going back to food, I do have a lot of eggs, and eggs are a natural way for choline, and I love eggs, and I have those every day. So on this question of detox and advice around that, because I was so broken down, I couldn't go into some massive detox or fasting or anything like that. I've done it extremely gently these last 6 months. And I think my detox is going to last multiple months more. So one of the things that I'm finding, if you're very sensitive, homeopathy can be really great for detox. So I'm using a range, Pekana, they're a German range, but they do some really good ones. They've got deep tissue one, they've got a lymphatic system one, they don't cost much. The liver one is amazingly powerful for anyone who doesn't believe in homeopathy. Oh my gosh, very effective. So whether it's that or whatever else, you do need to keep up the detox. And then I think the last thing is on the psychological side of it, if you're targeted, is sort of try and keep it fun. I know that sounds... So how we deal with it in our house is that whilst my husband can't really comprehend what's been going down, he is very sensitive, and what he's absolutely brilliant at is if I am getting targeted attacks, beam frequency, he can actually see it, which is just amazing. And so it's like a little bit of a game, really, and that's what I'm talking about here, just to keep it light. So I might be feeling a burning coming into my head or something, and I can say, oh, can you please have a look, there's something coming in. And then he'll say, oh, I can see a sailboat above your head, or this morning I had something, my ear all of a sudden started hurting. And he said, oh, I can see a yellow beam coming in. And then it was like sort of a game almost, and he's like, zap it away to shift it. That for me feels a healthy approach to it, rather than, oh my God, I've got this beam coming in anyway. I've had it going on now for a good 18 months, so it's sort of the novelty factor has worn off. But I do think it's important to keep things upbeat, keep a sense of humor about it, stay positive. And this runs into my final point. We truly don't know where this is all going to lead. Miracles happen where people say miracles can't happen. People spontaneously cure of things when it's said it's impossible. And although at a technical level, when one looks at the facts, this nano-poisoning thing is daunting, I prefer to take a beyond the beyond perspective and to stay very open in a neutral, positive way, to take every day at a time, because if every day I'm learning, every day I'm evolving, if even when there's a bad day and I sort of get taken out, I know that I will bounce back, because, look at all these tips and advice and this whole support framework. Put that in place and you absolutely will. And then when you come back knowing more, understanding more. And I know this sounds crazy, but I feel that our cells are going to work with us and collaborate with us. What do I mean by that? Once we know we've got these horrible little things circulating in our blood and everything else, we have still got good organic stuff in our bodies. And I believe that if our cells can adapt and change, so that they are conscious of, aware of what's going on, because they've been blind just like us. The veil, they're not seeing everything. So that's my little piece, that cells have a consciousness to them, and who knows, maybe they are going to wake up too, and they will be able to come on the team and to help us through this. So I just want to end on that positive note. Hope those tips and things were useful.